What are the most radical climate solutions? Let's start off with a question about planes. So where's the worst place to be in a plane crash? Quite a few of you are saying that front is the worst, whereas the back is definitely the safest place to be. So the best place to be in a plane crash is the back, and the worst place to be is the front. Mears is saying that the front is better for when you land and take off because it's quicker. Cunning, Mears. Well, you've got to balance your options, survival or convenience of plane flight. Someone was describing to me climate change a little while ago as like being in a plane, and we're all aboard this plane, and we can all see what the pilots are doing, and the pilots are just accelerating into a cliff edge. We can't really tell how far away the cliff edge is, but we know we're driving towards it. The current state of the world is one where everyone's saying, well, we'll be able to turn up later and avoid the cliff, so let's not worry about it too much now. It's very difficult to say whether we will be able to turn up the later we leave it. This relates to something called the precautionary principle. If you know something really bad is going to happen in the future, and all of your scientists are telling you, like, we're heading towards climate disaster, the precautionary principle says that the sensible thing to do would be to take precautions. And to take precautions would be to swerve up away from the cliff as fast as we can right now. Would you want the pilot to aim for near the top of the cliff? No, you'd want them to go as clear of the top as they possibly could, because it's not worth taking the ultimate risk. But instead, we continue to accelerate along this path. And if you've seen the graph that I show every now and then of CO2 increasing, it is not slowing down. And no, it has not slowed down during the lockdown. The curve of increasing CO2 continues to accelerate up and up and up and up. Right, okay, so let's talk about some of the most radical climate solutions that have been proposed. First of all, who knows what this is? And for those who haven't been, this part of the UK is called the Lizard. And it's the southernmost part of the mainland. So this is an algal bloom. Now, why would an algal bloom happen? You might have already learned about what happens when fertilizer from farms starts leaching into the rivers. Then you also get an algal bloom inside the river. Angel is saying, is it silt? Okay, so rather than it necessarily being chemical fertilizers in the ocean, although sometimes it could be a result of chemical fertilizers, often it's the result of, say, a huge amount of flooding on some area of land, or some weather event that has caused loads and loads of nutritious sediment or silt to enter the ocean. So basically you create this situation where you've got in the ocean loads and loads of the nutrients and things that the algae needs to rapidly multiply and create loads of itself, and so it populates the entire surface of huge areas of the ocean. These algal blooms, whether it be on the surface of a river or on the surface of the ocean, block out loads of sunlight, and so all the other plants and kind of plant-like organisms that are usually hanging out underneath the surface of the sea suddenly find themselves really struggling to get the sunlight that they normally get, and so they might die off. And as they die off, they might then be digested by loads and loads of bacteria, and these bacteria come in and they eat them all up, and as they eat them up, the bacteria use up loads and loads of oxygen, and before you know it, with this fertilizer you've created a massive demand for oxygen, because there's now so much bacteria living here trying to eat all the oxygen, and then loads of the stuff in the ocean or the river starts to die off as well, because you're creating a big oxygen depletion in the ocean. So why would it be a radical climate solution to create loads of algal blooms? Why would we want to create them? So I think Venerable Sugar said it takes up all the CO2. Hun Monster said the same, captures loads of CO2. Brilliant. So these algal blooms are going to absorb loads and loads of carbon dioxide. And so as they do so, that is considered part of a radical climate solution because it rapidly pulls CO2 out of the air, in theory. Even though it would be pretty cool if you could suck loads of CO2 out of the atmosphere, what do you think happens in the long run? So ultimately, this algal bloom upsets the balance of nature. And even though it temporarily absorbs loads of carbon dioxide, because lots of nature dies as a consequence of the algal bloom really messing with things, then loads of carbon dioxide is ultimately released. And the gains are nowhere near as big as people originally calculated, because just like always, people oversimplified the whole thing and they thought plants take carbon dioxide out of the atmosphere, so let's get a load of those and that'll sort out the problem. You need nature to be thriving in order to take carbon dioxide out of the atmosphere, because nature is the main global store of carbon. Who knows what these ships are? These are like catamaran ships with these huge chimneys on. Ooh, so Hunmonster's really close and saying they pump aerosols into the air to start spawning clouds, which is really close. Or salts, that's it. So it's salts. So what these things do, and this is actually a crazy, brilliant idea, and you've got to hand it to whoever came up with this. I don't know who came up with it, but what these things do is they take seawater and then they pump the salty water in really, really fine droplets up into the air. And this carries loads of salt up into the air as well as water. And so the clouds that may or may not already be there then basically get a lot more full of salt. And that makes the clouds much whiter. The proposal is to operate these around the Arctic and the Antarctic. So the idea is to basically whiten all of the clouds above the poles so that the white clouds reflect way more of the sun's radiation, and so the sun's radiation never quite gets to the sea, because obviously the sea is very dark. When that dark sea is exposed to sunlight, it gets very hot very quickly, melts the ice even more, and then because there's less ice, which is white, to reflect the heat off, it's a vicious cycle of the oceans getting hotter and hotter. So the solution is maybe we can whiten the clouds above. I don't know if this has been tested yet, and I presume something will go wrong, because that's what almost always happens when you have a radical climate solution that does not involve just bolstering nature. But still, that is another thing that is being considered. Next question, and this is going to be quite a controversial one. How much do you think it could be a solution to reduce the human population? There's some people saying, I mean, technically it works. Angel is saying it's very complicated. Venerable Sugar is saying it might work, but a lot of ethical problems. So in terms of just numbers, then yes, if there were fewer people on the planet, then in general, we would assume that fewer resources would be used, and that therefore we would have a smaller impact on the planet and take a smaller amount of land. However, this reduce the human population argument is one that is often bandied about as like a simple escape of the problem without really addressing the actual problems, because the real problems are things like our food system is incredibly inefficient, and so there's that, and there are other problems in terms of how we create power and so on, and people saying, oh, let's just reduce the human population often plays into the hands of people who are really, really wealthy. So this is a chart showing the distribution of wealth in the United States of America from the first % of the population all the way up to the 50th % of the population, and so on. So if you're the middle wealthiest family in America, you might have just short of about $100,000 total. As you go up the population, things go completely crazy like this. If you were to earn £2,000 per hour and you were to work Monday to Friday, 9 to 5, every single day without ever taking a holiday, all the way from 0 AD all the way up to now, then you would have a huge amount of money. But there would still be 30 people in the USA who would be wealthier than you. That is the absurdity of the distribution of wealth in the USA, but also that represents kind of much of the world. Anyway, the reason why culling off loads of the world population to try and fight climate change would be not a very good solution is because the people who would inevitably be killed as a consequence of any kind of program would inevitably be the most powerless and poor people. And these people between them have hardly any wealth when you compare it to the super wealthy. So the problem is not really about the fact that there's huge numbers of people, it's about the fact that you have extremely wealthy people who lead extremely impactful lives with massive carbon footprints. Now, I just wanted to reiterate this idea, because this is the most important part of the entire life, is that these radical climate solutions are almost always not good. If we're getting to the point where we're having to use radical climate solutions, we're in huge trouble. These climate solutions that work are the ones that work because they use the fact that nature is already the best carbon store on the planet. When the world is covered in life, we are in a much better position. And we need that even more so than ever before, because we've pulled all these fossil fuels out of the ground and turned all of that into carbon dioxide as well. So we need to create the most alive planet that we've had in millions of years, which means we not only need to be bolstering areas like rainforests, but we need to be bolstering even our own homes, just the layers of soil. People forget that a single teaspoon of soil contains more living things than the entire human population of the world. Soil is one of the most amazing carbon sinks in the world as well. And ultimately, the workable climate solutions are not radical. They are just borrowing what already exists, borrowing biology and harnessing it to try and pull us out of this mess.